It's inevitable that at some point in your life you are going to have to persuade someone to do something, to keep doing something, to stop doing something, to hire you, to sell a product. You are going to have to persuade. Today we will talk about persuasion, in particular related to the sales speech. Specifically, we will define persuasion, discuss the differences between informative and persuasive presentations, talk about a particular organizational style that is very appropriate for sales speeches, Monroe's motivated sequence, and then finally we'll talk about some key ideas for you to be able to succeed when you have to do a sales speech. For a definition of persuasion, let's turn to communication scholars Stephen and Susan Beebe of Texas State University, San Marcos. They define persuasion as the process of changing or reinforcing a receiver's attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors. So you are changing or reinforcing a receiver's attitudes. Those are the likes and dislikes. These are much easier to change than beliefs or values. Beliefs, what you understand to be true or false, are easier to change than a value, particularly through the use of evidence, but still pretty difficult. Values are your enduring conception of what is right or wrong. The values form the basis of your life goals, and they are the reason you do what you do. You are motivated to go to school, for example, because you value education. And of course, behaviors are what you do. As you can tell, we use persuasion all of the time, and the primary purpose then is to motivate the beliefs and or actions in an audience. What differentiates between an informative and a persuasive presentation? We'll talk about four main differences. The first is informative presentations provide information. That's why they're called informative speeches. They are providing information in a non-judgmental way, very neutral way. In contrast, persuasive presentations urge the audience to make a choice, to vote for a candidate or not, to spend money or not, to change their behavior or not. A second difference is that informative presentations ask for very little commitment from the audience. All you're asking the audience to do when you're giving an informative presentation is to spend the time to listen to the information. In comparison, persuasive presentations ask for significantly more commitment from the audience. They're asking them to change their behavior. They're asking them to spend money. Significantly more commitment than just spending time. A major difference between informative and persuasive presentations is informative presentations focus on the subject of the speech. If you're doing a speech on roller coasters, you're likely to talk about the history and the types of roller coasters. You are focusing on the roller coaster. If instead you're doing a persuasive speech urging your audience to, for example, boycott roller coasters, then perhaps the history isn't as important. Perhaps the most recent information is important. I'm going to appeal a lot more to emotions because that's going to be more valuable in getting the audience to do what I want them to do, which in this case would be to boycott roller coasters. The fourth difference is a little bit more complicated. Persuasion begins where information ends. What that means is that persuasion contains information, but it goes beyond just providing it. So not only will you give statistics, for example, on accidents on roller coasters, but you will use that to persuade people to do something. And sometimes it's as simple as using words. If you could say 50% of people who ride roller coasters experience severe debilitating fear, and instead you're adding in a surprising 50%, or as little as 50%, or an unacceptable 50%. Just your word choice makes it a persuasive speech. A very common organizational structure for persuasive presentations is Alan Monroe's motivated sequence. This is the sequence of idea which, by following the normal process of human thinking, motivates the audience to respond to the speaker's purpose. Key word here is motivates. You can think of motivates as a motive for action. This is a very needs-based approach, that we identify what needs the audience has, and then we satisfy those needs with our solution here. The second thing that I want you to notice is it is supposedly the normal process of human thinking, meaning that it's a very logical step-by-step organization. There are 5 steps in this process, the first of which is the attention step. You need to get your audience's attention in a way that's related to the subject. If you don't get my attention, then I'm not going to listen to your persuasive presentation, and then there's no way that I can be persuaded to part with money or to change my behavior. The second step is that you need to develop a need in the audience. The audience has to feel like there is something missing or there is something wrong with what is currently happening now. This is why the word motivates comes in here. You are motivated, for example, to drive less if you feel that you have a need for clean air. That might be a physical need. So we can talk about a physical need, a psychological need, we need to feel good about ourselves, and a social need, we need to feel that society is in good shape. And if you've already learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's great. If not, I would refer you to a textbook for that. There are 4 steps that we look to when we talk about needs. The first is you have to tell us that we have a need, so you need to state it. The second is you have to illustrate it. So tell a story, do something that shows me that it's a real need. Then you have to develop the need. You have to make a point of adding in additional information. And finally, the one that most people forget is they need to relate the need. You have to tell me personally why it's important to me, why I have the need. At the end of the need step, we should feel like, oh, we really need to have something. What is it that we can do that will solve this problem, that will satisfy the need that you've just identified for us? That would bring you to the 3rd step, which is the satisfaction step. Now, the satisfaction step should address everything you've brought up in the need step. Say you're trying to sell Pop-Tarts, a breakfast item. In the need step, you've identified that we have limited time. The food items that we have are not good for us, that we don't have lots of good vitamins and minerals in there, and that it's very costly to stop by, say, McDonald's to pick something up. In the satisfaction step, you want to address all 3 of those items. After the satisfaction step, you'll talk about visualization, and visualization is where you are pretending like you're looking into a crystal ball, and you're trying to tell us what wonderful things will happen if you buy our products, if you vote for whoever I'm asking you to vote for on election day, if you do what I tell you to do. That would be positive visualization. Negative visualization is the flip side. This is what will happen if you don't buy my product, if you don't vote for my candidate on election day, if you continue doing what you're doing. You're visualizing for your audience what the future will look like without your solution. So you have a positive, look at how wonderful life will be if you adopt my solution, and you have a negative technique, look at how horrible life will be. Sometimes people will use both the positive and the negative techniques in a combination. If you do that, you tend to mention the negative before you mention the positive visualization. And that would lead you to the last step, which is the action step. In the action step, you need to give your audience enough information so that they can either buy your product or make that change. Let's say you're asking somebody to sign a petition. You need to have the petition there. If you're asking somebody to buy a product, you need to tell them how much it costs if you haven't already in the satisfaction step and where to buy it. And of course, you want to end in a very conclusive manner so that people feel comfortable. You also want to ask for the sale. Ask them to do something then. One way to remember the 5 steps in Monroe's motivated sequence is to remember the first letter of each step. Think ANSVA: attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. Monroe's motivated sequence is really not a new idea. You can see that it's very similar to another organizational structure that you're probably very familiar with, which is problem, cause, solution. In the attention step for Monroe's motivated sequence, it serves the same purpose as the introduction step in a problem, cause, solution organization. The second step in Monroe's motivated sequence is the need step. You'll notice that that encompasses the problem and cause step in the problem, cause, solution step. You're telling us that there's a problem, it exists, which is stating the need. It's significant, it affects the audience, and if we don't do anything about it now, it won't be solved. The cause is necessarily because once you determine the cause, you can then determine what the solution is. The satisfaction step as the 3rd step and the visualization, which is the 4th step in Monroe's motivated sequence, combine oftentimes to meet the solution step in the problem, cause, solution part. You're telling us what solution will solve the problem. And then the last step is the action step, which functions very similar to the conclusion in the problem, cause, solution. Again, you want to end in a way that makes the audience feel like the speech has been concluded. Now, the visualization step is kind of iffy. If you'll notice, it's listed on here as part of the solution step. Sometimes people will use the visualization step as part of the conclusion, but a good problem-cause-solution speech usually includes a visualization step. Let's move next to some key ideas to succeed if you have to do a sales speech. The first is very important. You need to consider the audience. CBS Money Watch says you have to know their pain before you can soothe their pain. So do a strong audience analysis. Don't try to sell a group of college students a Rolls-Royce automobile because they probably can't afford it. Select an appropriate item to sell. You should target your sales pitch to address the problems that customers need to solve. So again, once you find out what problems they need to solve, then you'll know what items to sell. Identify what needs the item satisfies. Many speakers assume that the audience knows what they need, and they go straight from the introduction, which is a very vague need step, to the satisfaction step. In this case, you should be developing the need. Emphasize the because. Why do they need it? Preempt some potential concerns. Maybe the audience might be concerned about how much something costs, or maybe it's not healthy. So before they have a chance to ask those questions, see if you can work it in to answer the questions or preempt them. Obviously, you have to be concerned about how you deliver your presentation. People aren't going to buy something from you, whether it be an idea or a product, unless you appear to be authentic, and creativity will help people remember it after your presentation is over. And then we've mentioned this before, you need to ask for the sale. Ask them to buy on the spot. Many people won't buy unless they've been asked to buy. Quiz time for you. Say you're preparing a sales presentation on electronic books or e-books. What needs would you address for a group of senior citizens? Those needs are likely to be different than if you were doing a presentation to a class of high school seniors. And their needs will likely be different than if you were presenting to your colleagues at work. And what are the similarities between problem, cause, solution and Monroe's motivated sequence organizational structures? You should have a better idea about how to prepare your sales speech. We're looking forward to an awesome speech from you.